In this episode, I'll be talking with Mary Debono. Mary helps horses and riders enjoy freer, healthier movement, even if they're challenged by injury, arthritis, anxiety, or aging. A certified Feldenkrais practitioner, Mary's clients have ranged from pleasure riders to international competitors. Her ability to address the underlying cause of a problem sets her work apart and can lead to surprising improvements in both the horse and human. She's an international clinician with over 30 years' experience. Mary helps horses and riders be more athletic, balanced, and confident at any age. She's based in California and offers online programs and works with equestrians all over the globe. We found a lot of common ground in how we approach improving horses' movement, so I think you're going to really love our conversation. I know we did. So here we go, episode 137, Restoring Healthy Movement with Mary Debono. Hi, I'm Karen Rolfe, and welcome to Horse Training in Harmony. This podcast is about you making progress with your horse in a way that you both can love. It's about learning how to move and be in harmony. Because yes, you really can develop a horse to be both athletic and happy. When we show up as our best selves for our horses will show up for us. So let's get started. Well, I am here with Mary Debono, and thank you, Mary, for taking the time to be here on this podcast with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Karen. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to do another conversation with you. I think I should share how I came across you in the first place. I had posted a video of one of my horses who was lame, and I was doing this thing that I call moving massage, which some of my listeners may have heard about. I'm just putting a gentle touch on, and then he stops limping, at the walk. And so I had posted that video saying, hey, does anybody know what the heck is going on here? Because it was pretty remarkable and got lots of people commented. But for some reason, Mary, your comment stood out. I just thought it was interesting. And it was interesting. So it made me reach out and talk to you some more about what's going on. So I think I'll talk a little bit about that video and what you had said and what was going on a little bit later as we go. But I thought maybe we should just start by, introducing you and letting you describe a little bit about what Feldenkrais is, because you do you're a certified Feldenkrais practitioner. Yes. And work with horses and people and dogs, I guess, too. So
yes.
I'd love for you to share just what is Feldenkrais, and then we'll kind of get into what you do with it.
Okay, sounds good. So the Feldenkrais method it's a holistic approach that uses directed attention and gentle movements to basically retrain the nervous system. And the key thing here is directed attention. So with humans, for example, I will lead, because I do programs both online and in person, where I will lead people through very specific sequences of movement, and I will verbally direct their attention, okay? Because I can do that with humans, with adult humans anyway. I also have worked with children, babies. But with horses now, it's obviously a little bit different. So we use our touch in such a way that we direct the attention very specifically. And before I clarify that, I want to say that with humans, we also do a hands-on form of it, and that's called functional integration, which is a part of the Feldenkrais method. And I've done that also for 30 years. So basically, you're either using verbal instructions or your hands or both to have the individual horse or human have more attention in very specific ways. Because when you think about it, if you have attention and movement, what does it do? It actually stimulates neuroplasticity. It potentiates the brain in a very meaningful way. So this work is very much about stimulating neuroplasticity, and really meaningful neuroplasticity, meaning something that you can take into your functional life. So for a horse, that's being able to move the limbs easily, to round the back easily, to bend the neck, whatever it happens to be. And that's how we do it, because it's, if you think about it, Karen, like we all have habits. We have habits of how we move. And this is one way if I have like a few minutes to teach a little group or something, I tell everyone, go ahead and interlace your fingers. Now, of course, if you're listening in the car, don't do this, but do it later.
Good point.
That might be problematic. But if you can, go ahead and interlace your fingers and notice which index finger is on top. Which is your, and then open your hands, lengthen your fingers, slide them all over so the other index finger is on top. And does it feel different? Everyone, I think I had one person once say it didn't feel different out of all the people I did this with. And one student had a really nice way of describing it. She said, it's like holding hands with a stranger when you do it the second way.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because isn't that great? And I thought, wow, that makes sense. So to me and to everyone, that's a habit. So in other words, the way we interlace our fingers is a habit. So when I just say it without, telling you why I'm doing this, you just do it your habitual way, right? No big deal. And habits can be very useful. You have a habit of how you tie your shoes, right? Like all these things can be good for us. However, we also have habits about how we use our bodies. So for example, we have habits of how we coordinate our low back and pelvis, how we hold the muscles around the hip joints, what we do with our neck. Another big one, how we use our rib cage. So many people, I'm going to say virtually everybody, if they haven't addressed this, fold a little bit more to one side than the other. And a lot of times you don't see, right? You see it as a trainer, I bet.
Oh, I do it I see in myself. I've got all kinds of things that take a lot of maintenance of my attention.
Oh, okay. Well, I always say, if you said, okay, Mary, you can only help people with one thing, riders especially, like one thing, it would be that, because it's so pervasive. It's like everyone does it. And I was the poster child for this before I started started training in the Feldenkrais method. So in the Feldenkrais method, we help, again, this could be verbal or it could be, hands-on movement. And we help people feel that they're doing that and give them very unique strategies to be able to change it. Because, as you know, if you just tell someone to sit up straight and not bend that way, they're going to create other compensations, other habits. So it's really important to do it in a way that brings a sense of awareness and ease and pleasure to the movement. So the brain will want to do it automatically. So this really distinguishes the Feldenkrais method from other approaches, because we're focusing on function and we're doing it in a way that it's, we're stimulating neuroplasticity and in a very, I'm going to say like practical way. And what I love about it is people, as a matter of fact, just the other day, someone told me this. After doing the lessons with me, the movement lessons, they start spontaneously doing the movements. And I can see it in my students on Zoom. I see how they're moving so differently, and it's so beautiful. So it's a way of basically, in simple terms, using directed attention and hands-on contact to potentiate the brain, to bring in new options in how an individual moves and feels. And I want to just clarify something just a little bit. So I was trained as a Feldenkrais method practitioner, so it's a 4-year training, but I adapted it to 4-legged animals. So I call that adaptation Debono moves, and that's what I teach people. So we use the Feldenkrais method to help the humans, and then we use Debono moves to help the horses, the dogs, the cats, etc.
There's so much in what you just said. I mean, like, we're 8 minutes in, and I'm like, wait, we gotta go deeper. That was so cool. And, that simple activation of, to experience the difference in your hands. I mean, this is something, I think where I got so excited talking to you and what I do to try to help create alignment with horses in a way, like what you said, in a way that has some ease so that you end up wanting to, right? And so I have actually a lot of asymmetries in my body. Like when doctors take an x-ray of my back, they all go, ooh, and they call in other doctor friends and go, look at this. So it's been a lifelong.
And that's never what you want to hear, by the way, right?
Like, that's cool. You have scoliosis, but you curve the same way twice, I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, so I've been a little bit obsessed with, for me, the dressage is almost like it is physical therapy for me because I get all this feedback. But I've noticed, if there's a couch, I will tend to gravitate to the side of the couch. So I'm always leaning a little left and looking in a certain direction. And if I catch myself, I will pick myself up and move myself to the other side of the couch. So I have to do the opposite. Mm-hmm. But that's like the gross version, because you're right. There's still the original contortion. I just recontort another way, but it's a good way to start having awareness. You're driving in the car. I'm leaning on my left elbow. If I catch myself, I try to like put more weight in my right elbow on the console. So I think there's a way to practice just becoming aware and doing one's own version of that. And then when I go to, the person that I work with, she's always like, oh my gosh, you're so aware, because I've already been thinking about it. And then she helps do it more. But I think the Feldenkrais just seems, I really need to find a practitioner because it's so, I know, I'm like mental note, because it just seems to get really deep into the neuro part of it, not just put your body somewhere, but how are you? Yeah. So I really love that idea.
And it's really tailored to the individual because, and even when I'm teaching in a group, so I do I do my programs online and I have a group. So what we do is you become your own inner authority. Just what you were saying, Karen, how aware you are. And because you are a brilliant writer and trainer, you have that already, a heightened sense of awareness. And so what feels, that feels a little bit easier. That feels a little more comfortable. And then you build on that, right? So, but a lot of people, some things feel familiar and they think it feels good or comfortable, but it doesn't. It's just familiar. So the nervous system has basically zeroed it out, like said, oh, she does that all the time. I'm not going to pay attention to it. Yeah. And that really dulls our awareness. Mm-hmm. So I always say small things become big things, both good and bad. So having that level of awareness, which is what the Feldenkrais method brings out in people, is real, and horses, the way we do it, is really, really powerful. And it really helps people because not everyone embodies the side bending the same way. So maybe we have a group of 12 people and they all, have a habit of side bending more to one side than the other. Very common. But the way they do it and the way they manifest that habit can be very different. So for a lot of people, they'll side bend more. I see it more on the right, that they shorten the right side. Then it often throws the weight onto the left seat bone, but it doesn't have to. Some people that doesn't happen. They do something funny on the right side of the pelvis. You know what I mean? So it
gets complicated really quickly.
It gets complicated. And this is what I love, because the Feldenkrais method addresses it all and gives you that level of authority and awareness that you think, what if I try it this way? And I'm giving verbal cues, right? Helping people along, but they ultimately make the changes, their nervous system. And that's why it's so powerful. It's not something done to a person or a horse. It's you're creating a learning environment for the human or the horse, and their nervous system decides what's good and what isn't.
And this is something that really excites me. And I think we should at some time be in the same place at the same time with some horses, because
Oh, I would love that. Yes.
part of the strategy of like my sweet spot and the basic alignment exercise is where, we let the horses, just look, let the horse go and find their crookedness. And when we start to identify the crookedness, then I have the riders even like, we'll go a little bit more crooked and just like stop and rest there in the shape of that crookedness and just let them alone. Don't try to hold it there. And then I say, well, what's the opposite of that? Like, what would be something in, overshooting whatever we think may be aligned is like, but go the other direction. And we kind of play with that with their shoulders, their hips, and just like, it's an experiment. Like, well, what moves? And try that,
Right.
leave it alone. And so what happens is the horse goes from their familiar crookedness. They're like, this feels good because I'm used to it. They pass through a line, they go past it to this other thing that usually feels harder, but we only stay there for a moment and then we relax and then we let them do what they want. And they go back and forth across this midline. And at some point, the horse goes, hey, this new spot actually feels better. And they start to breathe. So when you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the same concept.
That's this very, very similar. So, and so you're doing it, I'm assuming mostly, well, I guess groundwork and riding.
We'll do it online and in the saddle, but it's really based on, I'm using communication. So I see the horse being crooked and I go, hey, can I communicate to you the request to move your shoulder? And then of course they have to understand the request. And then they go, hey, but that's hard. There's a reason I'm been avoiding this. And so then how do we do it in a way that like, I know it's hard, just do it for a moment. And we're going to like, actually just let you halt there when you get there and leave you alone or just let you swing back. So it's building on communication and then a lot of trust, right? Because I'm saying, can you do the thing that you've been avoiding, but do it in a way where they go, oh, that wasn't so bad. I'll give that a try. Because if we get them into defensive mode, nothing's going to happen. So that's sort of I think it sounds like, what you're doing is probably more deep down, sophisticated, directed where I'm kind of slishing and sloshing, but in that slishing and sloshing, we're like what you said, we're opening up movement possibilities. And as long as I don't tweak the defensiveness system,
that's the important part, right? So the way we do it in the work I teach is that I'll have the person do it with the hands first. So in other words, just say, to use a common example, a horse bends more easily in one direction. So we go down and we find all the nuances of that, but just start with something simple like the way the ribs and the spine are coordinating. And we actually, just like what you're doing, exaggerate that, actually support that. So we call that supporting the pattern. So here you have a habit that the horse has. And instead of saying, oh, no, don't do that, right? We're going along with this sounds like what you're doing, right? You're actually going more into that. And that does a number of things. To your point, yes, it actually helps the horse relax because that is familiar and it feels safe to the nervous system. It's like, that's what I already do. Yeah. But when you use, for example, the hands, and people actually learn how to do this in the saddle, when you use the hands to do it, you actually start to take over the work of the muscles. So the brain gets a signal that says, oh, I can let that go. Oh, and so suddenly now you have more availability to be, say, maybe neutral. And then in due time, you start to just suggest the new direction. But you go back, just like what you're saying, you go kind of back and forth. But that's really important that the way we do, because I do teach the hands-on. I don't teach riding. I leave that to brilliant trainers like yourself. I teach how they can use their hands. And then we do I give them hints of what they can do in the saddle. But the idea is to take over the work in very particular ways that the brain is paying attention and then says, oh, someone's doing that for me. And, I do this with humans too. So if I have someone lying on their side, for example, or even sitting in a chair, but it's better lying down, and I hold their ribs in the position that they like so much, that I say like, meaning their habitual position that their brain likes. When I slowly let go, and the key is very slowly, they're straighter, because and they didn't have, and there was no conscious decision to be straighter. It's just that the brain recognized I don't have to hold those muscles so tight to hold that position. So it's so fun, because it's you become just like when you're training, right? You're like a detective, finding all the different nuances, and how does this horse do this, and how does this person do this, and then we address it on this level of the nervous system had a good reason to develop that habit. And that's what I always remind people of. Your nervous system had whatever the habit is, whether it's sitting crooked, whether it's weight bearing more on one leg, always leading with one leg, which is very common, or whatever habit your horse has, the nervous system had a good reason. And so it's attached to that habit. It feels, okay, this got me through. And maybe it happened years ago. But so this is why we have to be very careful when we bring in a new possibility. So we do a lot of like relieving efforts, supporting, doing all this, and then we can gradually introduce new options and make sure the horse is feeling safe, or the human. So a quick story I'll share with you, Karen, if you don't mind, was about, I was called to work with this horse who had a chronic suspensory ligament injury. And 3 different vets had worked with the horse, and they all agreed that the horse would never be sound. This was never going to heal. It was all calcified and everything. And she was only 10 years old, the horse. And the woman who owned the horse was very upset, wanted to help her horse. Someone told her about me, or she arranged for me to come to her barn. And what I noticed about the mare was she was at a standstill, weight bearing more heavily on the injured leg than the other one. This is not uncommon, believe it or not. So nobody had noticed that. And I'm talking subtle things. So in other words, when I very gently moved her, like I do it from the rib cage in a circular way, she was like, she wanted to be on that injured leg. She didn't want to be on the other one, on the other front. And I noticed, I think it was the left front. So her whole left side, that's where her habit was to weight bear more on that side. And even her muscle development was a little bit more developed on that side. And when I pointed this out to the owner, she said, she even sweats more on that side.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was very interesting. So what I ended up doing with her was, again, I supported what she was doing, but not that I was taking more weight onto it, but I was very gradual, and I did it actually through working with her sternum, helped her feel that she could be safe weight bearing on each of the legs. Now, if I had tried to just push her weight over, like rocked her away from me onto the other leg, the sound one, everything in her nervous system would have reacted badly to that and said, oh, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. And what you end up doing is you create a lot of resistance in the horse and a lot of tension. And by the way, this is true for any species, us, dogs, whoever. So I had to be very careful in how I was introducing that new possibility. She caught on. She did great. She went on to full soundness.
Wow.
And she never had another problem. But the interesting thing was, the owner told me, once I got started and figured this all out, she said 5 years ago, she badly injured her right front. So, and it was in a situation where there was a lot of emotion attached to it. So it was, I think, really stuck in her that her brain said, oh, we have to protect that leg. So she learned over these 5 years to use the other side more, which then, of course, led to this injury, which then wasn't healing because she wasn't giving it the chance. So even though she was lame at the trot, when she was at rest, which she was on stall rest, she was constantly overstressing that leg. It was, and I've had many situations like that with both tendons and ligaments and whatnot, back problems where they're stressing it more.
That's so interesting.
By the way, humans do this too, isn't it? So this goes down to that idea of habits, right? We have our habits about these things. So but again, it's very crucial how you introduce the new possibility, right? And that you can't just, tell the horse, okay, we're going to be this way now. And I know, obviously you don't do that. I'm just speaking to help other people, that they have to be very respectful that the nervous system has a good reason to do what it's doing. And so you have to communicate that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth highlighting because it seems to me, there's if we discover something like this, it's easy to think, oh, I need to help them get over there. Right, I mean, I think I can be guilty of being way too eager and, like, ooh, I have a great idea, horse. We need you over here. But that's really fascinating that from an original injury, this habit is set up and it's so ingrained that the brain, your brain can't think about your posture all day. It just goes, this is normal, to the point where now the injured leg is being more stressed. And you'd think that the body would go, hey, I need to shift away from that, but that you can still be limping on an injured leg, but still your weight is going towards it without the body being even aware of that. So that's pretty huge. And I wonder I would imagine that sometimes when you're helping a horse with a situation like this, and then you bring them back into, more alignment, that maybe you can discover, oh, that's why they've been moving off, because now, did you find that the lameness shifts a little bit? Like they, now they're more here, but then you go, oh, now you find out actually they've been protecting this other side, but now at least you're still getting to the root. Now you can go, oh, now right. I better now look at that right stifle. Because maybe that's the reason.
That's a great question, Karen. So thanks for asking that, because I am going to say that doesn't happen in my work, and I'll tell you why.
Interesting.
Because I am not making the change for the horse. I'm just setting up the learning environment. And this is where it's a big distinction between approaches that focus on structure. Like, oh, okay, this is tight or this is sore or whatever. I'm going to do something to change the structure. But when you do this with this nuanced way where you're asking the nervous system, does this feel easy? Does it feel pleasurable? Does it feel safe? The horse isn't going to make the change unless the nervous system is on board.
Gotcha. So they're not putting themselves in a more vulnerable place. They're always moving
not if you do it correctly.
I'm so glad I asked that question.
Yes, that was a great question. Thank you for that.
Or made that
really
statement
important.
That was
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's really, really important. And it actually is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. What I used to see, like in different horse publications, they will teach people how to, say, for example, massage one part of the body per month. Like, okay, this month we're doing the neck. Okay, everybody grab your horses. You're going to learn how to massage the neck. My question is always, why did the nervous system decide to restrict movement in the neck? So if you don't address that and you do something that probably would feel really good to the horse and the horse would really love and would result in freer movement of the neck, but you don't give the horse the infrastructure to support that freedom, now you have a horse that's vulnerable to injury.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the same thing with a human. Like if you just got some nice massage or something, and nothing against massage, by the way. I've done many years in the past of massage. You don't want to do it in a way that that the improvements aren't integrated through the whole system. You don't want to focus on in my opinion. I don't focus on structure. I focus, just like in the Feldenkrais method, on function. Mm-hmm. So we improve the function, the movement of the whole self, rather than focusing on individual parts.
So
But
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe this is a good moment for me to describe a little bit more about that video that I posted
Oh, yes,
and
yes,
your
yes.
answer because so my horse Atomic, who had a pretty major tendon injury, but he was able to be, walked. And so I was doing what I call my moving massage technique, which is, I feel like everything I do is kind of like a caveman version of what you're doing. but moving massage technique is basically going, I'm going to put my hands on my horse and feel what I feel. And if my hand wants to stop in a certain area, I'll just send love into that area and give the message of, what do you want to do with this? So, so he's in the video, he's walking and limping quite obviously. And my hand ends up going kind of on his rib cage behind his scapula. And I mean, very light touch, like touching the hair. And I just noticed, like, okay, my hand wanted to stop there. And when I stay there, I'm walking with him because for me, I love doing moving massage because I'm getting feedback from how the horse moves.
Yes.
And it's just like, so I don't have to guess, like, did I get the trigger point? I'm watching the horse move. And then he starts to not limp and
Yeah,
be very
that
free
was
with that. Like,
remarkable.
yeah. And then I take my hand off. I'm like, what's going on here? And he starts limping again. I put my hand back on. He stops limping. And that's when I called my husband. I'm like, you got to video this. So, yeah. So, and what you had, wrote back is that, it's something about how much his scapula is sliding. And then when I touched there, my quote unquote magic spot, he just made a little shift to his rib cage, which allowed the scapula to move. But I think it's like this integration. It's like, hey, here's something going on. And his body made all the decisions.
Right.
And that's what caused me to post the video going, somebody knows a little bit about what might be going on here. And you really went to that rib cage, and then you had sent me a video about with you moving the sternum and moving the rib cage. And so, yeah, I'd love just for you to kind of riff a little bit more about what you think was going on there. But I love the moving massage, to doing that while the horse is moving, to me has been incredibly powerful for so many horses, because I think of that integration of the movement. It's not just me working out what I think is a tense muscle.
Right. And I totally agree. And we do a lot of the work, the Debono moves, while the horse is moving as well. So we do it for standing, but then we bring it into movement. But with that one, that was so impactful, like to see how Atomic just softened through his rib cage when you put your hand there. That told me a lot, by the way, about how wonderful your moving massage is, because he immediately softened there. And he had this lovely like bend, so it allowed the scapula to slide more easily, which changed how the forces go through the leg. So often when I'm working with horses that have leg injuries, front leg injuries, for example, we do a lot of work with the ribs and the sternum, because that is key to being able to move the limb, all the limbs, actually all four, easily. And it literally changes how the force goes through. So that to me, you did such a beautiful, example of that you showed by having your hand like that. And so I'll give you another quick story about a horse with a different horse with a suspensory injury. I knew I could see the way the horse was walking. I knew if I could work with his rib cage, it would help heal this injury. Again, he had a chronic one. It was a long time that he was injured. He wasn't healing. I tried to put my hands on his rib cage, and he was no go about that. He was like, I don't want you touching my rib cage. So this is what I always do in those situations. If, first of all, there's always other places to touch, etc. You don't ever have to touch a horse where they don't want to be. But sometimes if you put something else between your hand and them for a horse that's really like that, it works. So I looked down on the ground. There was, I remember, a maroon lunge line. I picked it up. I asked the owner, how is he with ropes and things around him? Oh, he's fine. He's fine. And I made sure he was. And then I put it around his rib cage. And so instead of using my hands, I used this lunge line. Well, he thought that was the best thing ever.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it was really interesting. And so I was able to really this work is really delicate and subtle, but to move his ribs and to work with the tissue between the ribs and do all this stuff, that horse, first of all, he loved it. He totally changed the way his neck was, totally changed the way his scapula could slide over his ribs. And he walked off, and he also went on to full healing. So I knew I was onto something with that lunge line, and I started really playing with this. And I gradually, I did a lot of experimenting on one of my students who's, she's a Feldenkrais practitioner, a horse person, and a sailor and a rock climber. So she knew ropes, and we did, yeah, she was like the perfect partner. We came up with, a rope, a good quality yacht rope that you would probably use in your, as a lead line. And I started teaching people how to use this. I call it the rib rope on their horses, but also you can do it on yourself. And it's really good and it feels really good. I use different diameter usually for the horses and the people, but that was a game changer for a lot of people and a lot of horses, because especially when you do it with the humans, they realize, oh, wow, when I improve my ribs, suddenly my shoulder pain went away, or I could move my arm more freely, or I could turn my head more easily. So they start to get the connection between improving the movement in the center of the body and what it does for the extremities. And that's really important. So Atomic, you that was just perfect what you did, and why your hand went there was because you knew, right? You knew that was going to help them on some level.
Yeah.
I also love something. I also love something else you said, Karen, if you don't mind me just underlying it. You mentioned with the moving massage that you send love there. And I that to me is very key. And one way my work is with the horses is a little bit different than the Feldenkrais method is I actually put a focus on this synergistic effect we get from sending loving energy and also receiving loving energy, right? So that is something that, like, that having that intention and having that gratitude, I found that kind of like turbocharges the results of what we do with the horses.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that. And I just wanted to emphasize that for people, because I just think that's so important.
Yeah. Thank you. Because it is, there's so much with horses that we're asking things of them. Do this, do this, do this,
Right.
we're even if we're asking nicely, we're still asking. And so every time we touch them, we're asking for something. And this, the moving massage, this just putting your hands on and saying, I just love you and want you to feel better about everything is, it's such a great partnership, trust building way for them to think about our touch differently when they see us coming. I'm right. Gonna, and then we have to, of course, not violate that trust. But I've just seen it be so impactful to so many horses. So I love that you highlighted
Absolutely.
that. And
absolutely.
One thing that I have to look up this rope method. Do you have any videos on that accessible?
Oh, I do actually. I do. As a matter of fact, I could link to, I could send you a link to the
send me links.
Absolutely.
We'll make sure we
because
get
it's
that.
Yeah. And you could use I did do a lot of experimenting with the different kinds of rope, but if you didn't have something around, people just sometimes use their dog leash or their belt or whatever. Yeah. But the high quality yacht rope just works a little bit better because there's more life to it, there's more feel to it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
no, that's awesome.
We can do that.
And and I wanted to make sure I said I will post in the show notes to this episode. I'll post the link to the video of my horse Atomic that we're talking about too. The other thing when you're talking about the importance of the rib cage and how powerful that is, in training, I tell people all the time, like at first, we might think we have to something with the neck and, yielding the neck and yielding the shoulders, yielding the haunches, like all training eventually comes down to we're moving the girth area of the horse. Like, first you got to get the big stuff done, but in the end, it all happens in the girth area. And then what do? we sit on it, we put a saddle on it,
Yes.
we tighten a girth in that area. So when you were talking about the rope method, which I can't wait to go see, I'm thinking, I wonder if that helps the horse sort of be able to to be able to deal with, or that's not the right phrase, but when they're wearing a saddle and a girth,
Yes.
can they sort of, can it help get, diffuse the original tension that must come up when we first put a saddle and a girth on, that original thought, even if we're careful, I'm sure there's a habit that's set up around that, or sometime in the horse's past, somebody's cranked on a girth with a saddle that doesn't fit. And I will it help maybe unwind is a better, some of those old defense systems around that area?
Absolutely. And I feel, Karen, like you're in my brain. So this is like
likewise,
like we're on the same wavelength here. I just feel like, oh wow, she's reading my mind. So you're absolutely right. And when I said earlier, if you only gave me one thing to improve with people, it would be this idea of, how they side bend habitually. If you only gave me one thing to be able to improve with horses, it would be to help them not only tolerate saddling, but to actually enjoy it. So I actually have a whole program that I teach people how to make tacking up enjoyable for the horse and in such a way that improves their movement.
Oh, that's
a big
cool.
part of it is, yes. And that's a big part of it is using the rib rope and kind of simulating like a girth, but done in a, very particular way. And we have to lead up to that. And then we use the girth separately and move the sternum with the girth and do all those things. And I want to, so you're absolutely right. But before I go more into that, I want to say two things. You mentioned earlier about, I sent you a little video about using the sternum to help a horse soften the back. That is so important because your other point about somewhere in the horse's past, probably someone did something to make the girthing up not comfortable. I read about a study once. I can't cite the study because I never got the original publication. But they said that they had done necropsies with quite a number of horses, and they found that so many of them, like a big percentage of them, had evidence of hairline fractures of the costal cartilage. So the cartilage, for those who don't know, that attaches from the ribs down to the sternum area and the costal arch and all that. That's extremely painful. And none of the people knew that this had happened to their horses. So, horses tolerate so much, but they learn to brace, as we know, and they learn to contract the abdominals to protect. So these are things that if they're not addressed, it actually impedes the movement then of the sternum and the ribs. So, excuse me. So that is so crucial to be able to work with the sternum and the ribs in such a way that you're helping the horse rediscover that easier movement again. And to be able to, for example, move the sternum and ribs in such a way that the back can round, right? And to move it sideways and to be able to distribute their weight over their limbs in a healthy way. So that's number one. So your point about that's spot on, Karen, like spot on about that whole, the importance of it and how we do have to kind of retrain the horse. And it was so fun because I've had horses in my program that they hated this being girthed up, like pinning the ears, gnashing the teeth, the whole thing. They often get to a point where they're like, bring it to me, baby, bring it to me. Like, give me that girth, give me that girth, because it feels so good. It feels so good.
Well, that I'm going to have to learn about because when I do tacking and teach tacking, I talk about this thing of permission, right? So we want to ask horses, and horses know. I mean, after it's happened once, they know what's happening when you go pick up the girth. Like they know where it's going.
Right.
And so just to teach to observe them, and often if they pin their ears and I wait and I go, okay, not now. How about now? And if they pin their ears, I go, okay, how about now? And I find often if I just play that permission game, they go, okay, it's not going to be done to me. And then they go, I'm ready now. and then you do it. So that's like one layer of just the mental, emotional defenses, being let down. And then I'm sure what your technique is, just a deeper version. Because to get to the point where like, oh, it feels good. Like, I would really love to learn that. I'm going to have to.
Yes.
Now I'm super curious.
Oh, good. But I had a horse years ago. He was a fantastic horse named Spotsy. He was a leopard abbey. He taught me a really good lesson around that, Karen, what you're saying about permission. So I was getting ready to tack him up. I was getting ready to tighten the girth. And he was loose. I don't tend to tie my horses if possible. So he wasn't tied. And he was a horse that would nip. He turned around just as I was about to do it. And he put his teeth on the soft, fleshy part like of my waist. I did not stop him. I did not say, put your head back. I thought, oh, this is interesting. Now, I don't recommend anybody at home letting your horse do that. But I felt he had something to tell me. I know that may sound strange, but I felt he had something to tell me. And I got a clear indication that he was saying, this is how we feel. In other words, that even though I had never tacked him up in a uncomfortable way, it's like they're at our mercy, basically. Like you said, so they have to tolerate certain things. And he was letting me know, like, this is what it feels like. At any moment, someone can hurt us. And so he was letting me know, like, okay. And you know what? I continued to very slowly, the way I do it, tighten the girth. He never bit or anything. And then he put his head back and we were fine.
Wow.
But I thought I felt that inside me of how it must feel to be subject to, I'm going to stick this spur in you. I'm going to tighten the girth really roughly. I'm going to put in a bit that doesn't fit, whatever. Yeah. And it made me even more aware of that. So I always thank him for that lesson.
Yeah,
so
that's beautiful, because that to me is, our responsibility to the horse is one of my number one priorities. And we have to be aware of this at all time. Like we have control over their entire life experience. And to me, that's a huge responsibility. So I love that you were vulnerable in that moment, but you let yourself be vulnerable the way he's being vulnerable. And I have had that happen with, early on when I was doing more of this kind of work and at a clinic. And there was this horse that I usually get everybody playing with the basic alignment exercise and all this other stuff. And usually by the end of the clinic, like every horse is like blowing out and swinging and stretching on line. And there's this one horse that had a really nice owner, very capable, was getting the exercise. And I was like, this horse should be stretching. Like everything was saying, like, this ought to be happening. And you could feel it. You're like, oh, any second now, they're just going to blow up. And and it was just not quite there. And so I took the horse. I said, can I play with the horse? And I was doing my thing. And it got right to the edge of that. Oh, it's going to let down. And I will never forget this moment. The horse, right at that moment, pinned its ears, kind of leapt at me. I remember seeing teeth bared, and it all happened so fast. It was like, rah, and then it went out, and then it blew out and stretched and swung. It was totally cool. And like, it was so fast, I didn't have time to react. And I remember the message I got in that moment was like, if I could put a thought bubble above the horse's head, it was like, listen, lady, this is a vulnerable position I'm about to go into.
Oh, wow.
And you think about, like, what if I walked into a room all confident and someone like sucker punched me in the stomach?
Right.
Would I walk into a room all open and vulnerable? No, I'd probably be like a little hunched and protective. And then I think all the times that horses have had, saddles put on and weight put on them and everything that makes a horse go inverted and contracted. And here I was inviting the horse to do put their top line in the most vulnerable position, put their emotions, their head down, and I was like, wow,
right.
I really felt like where I'm tempting horses to go with this is extremely vulnerable. And from that moment on in clinics, I let go of the ego thing of like, oh yeah, at the end of my clinics, all the horses are stretching. Cause I go, if it doesn't want to, there's a reason and it's okay. It's like, I just make sure people are taking the next step. But I realized like, wow, I had a little bit of an ego thing about like, I can get any horse to stretch and let go. And I was like, that horse is like, okay, lady, but you better not violate this. Right. And I was like, wow, message received. Wow. But the horse did make a transformation. The owner it was with a new human, and the old humans were not the good ones. This one was a good one. And so he actually said, he's like, that was a life-changing moment for him and the horse. But I was like, oh, okay.
Wow. That was a powerful experience. And and for all of us to hear that, I think helps us be more aware of that. Like, in other words, it speaks to that whole idea that the nervous system, and not just like thinking physical movement, like the horse was capable of it, but emotionally, the nervous system has to be ready for that big change. So that was beautiful. Wow. Yeah,
it just reminded me when you said about what that horse did. It was like, we're both going to be vulnerable here. You get it?
Yes.
I was like, gosh, the messages they give us, I think I'll speak for myself. I probably get 10% of what they're telling me. But
I'm sure it's for me, I'm sure we're not getting all that we could be getting. Wow. But as long as I think, Karen, though, as long as we're open to, I have a thing I say to my horse, I say, call me if you need anything. And, like you would say to your husband, like if he's going somewhere, whatever, like, call me if you need anything. I say that to my horse, and I actually mean it, because it helps me feel like I want to be open. If I feel something, I'll receive it. If he's sending something, I'll receive it. So that's like one of the things after I tell him I love him and thank you and all that, I'm like, call me if you need anything. So it's that being open, being receptive, I think is obviously a big part.
So cool. I could talk to you for another hour. But
I know I could talk to you forever.
This flew by. So how about we just say we'll do a part 2 at some point.
Oh, I'd love it.
Or just we'll talk again. But this is, I have a list of stuff. I don't even know if we answered all those questions. So you have to come back for more. But I think this was so cool. I think this is enough for this one.
Okay, sounds.
And
good.
I really want people to soak this in, because this went up a different direction than I even thought we were going to talk about, but like super, super powerful and cool. And now I'm even more committed to, we have to be in the same place at the same time with horses in front of us. Yeah. So thank you so much for taking your time. Do tell people where, and I will add links to this in the show notes, but please tell people where they can find out more about you and find some of the things you offer.
So my website is marydebono.com, but if they go to marydebono.com/rider, they'll, you put in your email and you get 3 free Feldenkrais videos that they're done in a chair. They're short, they're 10 to 15 minutes. And it really addresses that side bending issue, among other things. It's like the first step of that. I'm not going to say, it makes a big change for people. And, and I would love if people have any questions, they can always email me at mary@marydebono.com.
Beautiful. Yep. And I'll add the links to that and in the show notes, wherever those are. You can always find it on my website, or most places where you're listening to your podcast will have the show notes if you click down enough.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Karen. This was such a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
To be able to talk to your audience. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.